you all for being here. It's been an interesting day, hasn't it? A night last night? Yeah, okay. Well, here we are. This is a good place to be. Margaret Griffin, who is a fellow of the AIA, is co-founder and principal of award-winning Los Angeles firm Griffin Enright Architects. Their work combines innovation and experimentation with a desire for cultural complexities relative to the built environment. Their work has been extensively published and received many awards for their excellence, including local, state, and national AIA awards. Technology faculty at SCI-Arc, where she has been teaching for the past decade. She holds a B.Arch from Syracuse and an M.Arch from the University of Maryland. Margaret's interest in practice-related research earned her a fellowship from the American Academy of Rome to investigate the relationship between urban form and landforms, and a subject she continues to examine in her architectural practice today. She also expands her practice through community service, both as an appointed board member to Santa Monica's Architectural Review Board and previously as director on the Los Angeles AIA Board of Directors, as well as providing her expertise in a variety of invited juries and advisory councils. Please join me in welcoming Margaret today. Thank you.
Thank you. It's so great to be here, and it's an honor to talk to you guys today. To Austin is a little bit like coming back to like an architectural legacy that I think John and I are a part of, which began in some ways here. John and I went to Syracuse University, which is where we met. John's the Griffin Enright. And when we were at Syracuse, the dean of Syracuse was Werner Seligman, who, of course, was a Texas Ranger, or one of a group that was referred to as the Texas Rangers that was started here, and he started his teaching career here at the University of Texas in the late 1950s. And our education consisted of a lot of the things that that group was interested in, which had a lot to do with a kind of a technique of drawing, a kind of Bauhausian technique about a kind of rigor to the way one draws, and also about a kind of new idea at that time in education, which was studying theory of architecture through studying the history of architecture. And in this case, it meant a lot of Le Corbusier. Of all these Texas Rangers, Werner was especially interested in Le Corbusier, and we basically learned many of the Corb's buildings like inside and out. In our freshman year of school, we had to, for our final exam, for our midterm exam, in our intro to architecture class, we had to draw plans, sections, elevations of Villa Savoy from memory to like the correct proportion and with the proper line weight. And the final exam was doing the same thing for Villa Garches. So we're really indoctrinated in these ideas about order. Movement was a thing that was especially talked about with Corb by Werner, and a kind of interest in spatial layers and space, which Werner, since he was a German, always referred to as Space. I thought it was interesting to talk about this heritage because I think in some ways there's a kind of kindred spirit, I think, between UT and Syracuse. Another thing that we looked at a lot was the kind of typologies. And so part of why Werner had us study both Villa Savoy and Villa Garches was because he believed that these two typologies represented a kind of context of Corb's work. Obviously the system domino, which he always referred to as a horizontal sandwich of space, and was of course a structure of columns and slabs, versus the Maison Citroën, which was about a kind of vertical slot of space and a kind of bearing wall system of structure. So these two poles had a lot to do with kind of our reading of the work of Le Corbusier, and he considered all of the projects of core being somehow a condition of those two conditions, many of them being kind of hybrids of that. Also, Cornell was right down the road from us, and Colin Rowe, of course, was at Cornell, so we were really trained a lot in urban conditions and in the kind of relationship between the space of the city and the space of architecture. And then, of course, our education consisted of everyone in the fourth year. At that time, we all went to Florence for a year, and we, really studied history in situ by visiting many, many buildings, and always kind of drawing and thinking about the kind of spatial volume of a building. So I moved to Los Angeles. I'm from Los Angeles, and I'm a kind of transplant. I'm originally from Pittsburgh, but in 1994, while I was teaching at Syracuse, I was basically watching the earthquake, which happened on Martin Luther King Day in 1994. I was watching the earthquake on TV, and while I was typing up all of my resumes and assembling my applications to in preparation for moving to Los Angeles. So I arrived in LA shortly after the earthquake, which was a very disruptive and also vital time to arrive in LA and begin teaching and begin to build the practice. I started Griffin Architects in 1998, and then in 2000 it morphed into Griffin Enright Architects. I think this is the laser pointer, so that's John. He's the Enright part. Our practice sort of officially began. I think that the basics. This is a kind of diagram that we've been reflecting on, and that really has a lot to do with how we think about what we're doing. We're kind of looking at this diagram in terms of this kind of relationship of opposites, stasis and movement, mass and lightness, space and form. And we're interested in the kind of more ephemeral conditions of lightness, space, and movement, and the kind of relationship to the kind of, let's say, more stable conditions of form, mass, and stasis. And so this diagram shows some of the inherent relationships among the architectural qualities that we're wrestling with and that we kind of use to think about hybrid forms, which I think is the kind of project that John and I are working on. I think that we're interested in the qualities of hybrid, the kind of qualities of hybrid forms and their ability to create a new identity. Hybrids are not reducible to singular conditions, a singular characteristic, yet they are singular in their ontology and almost always define a unique character. For instance, a horse and a donkey can make a mule, but a mule cannot make more mules. So what's fascinating about the hybrid condition is that it's simultaneously representative of a duality and a singular condition. And this we somehow think it resonates with a kind of our contemporary condition of culture. So our projects are developed from really very basic strategies, but they often yield a kind of new hybrid that somehow elevates a project, where we seek new forms, sometimes through new typologies, sometimes through new effect, and sometimes as a synthesis of multiple geometries. And we're especially interested in hybrid conditions of form and space, where multiple geometries create unfamiliar forms that resist singular description in favor of multiple readings. External and internal conditions are measured against each other and create transformed sensibilities that resist reductions to ideal forms. We're obsessed with movement, lightness, and space, and their effect on form and mass. Mass in our projects is deformed through the fluid condition of lightness, movement, and space. Oops. We're also interested in forms' hybrid capacities and the transformative capacity of new forms. We come from a generation, like I was explaining, that's pre-digital, a world of proportion, order, and space, but we combine these qualities with new morphologies to create new formal conditions. And we seek to transform experience through new synthetic relationships among previously disparate forms. Our projects differ in scale and context, spanning a spectrum of environments from urban scapes, landscapes, interiors, and domestic scapes. John and I are both urbanists by training, and we use figure ground to understand the spaces of a city as rooms, and we also use it at the scale of a household, a school, a neighborhood, or a city. We seek new opportunities for interaction of behavior to generate new relationships between previously discrete conditions. And we deploy strategic thinking to cross-examine site-specific conditions to generate new opportunities. So these are some of the aspects of our practice that combine interiors, landscape, architecture, and urban conditions. And today, I'm going to share a handful of projects that demonstrate how we're working on this topic. St. Thomas, the Apostle School, is a K through 8 school where basically there's an existing church and there was an existing building that we rehabbed, and then we added a new project back here. And the site is a very tight site. This project, in some ways, we might consider it part stable mass, part active void. It's a school that is active 24/7. It's very cost-effective. This project was done on a super low budget, and every single design move in the project solves 3 or 4 problems at a time. So part of how we are able to be so efficient and so smart about getting the most bang for our buck in this project, not just economically but spatially, was to really synthesize all of the kind of constraints of the problem into a few simple moves. So let's see. Basically, the main thing that we did was to site the new building in line with the existing building. And when in doing so, since north is up, that also allowed the new building, which you see here, to provide shade on the entire playground for the whole afternoon. So this is a parochial school, and which means it's private, but it's private at a really reduced kind of rate. It's not like a typical private school. So the kids that go here come from working families where both parents tend to work, and these kids stay at school every day after school until 6 p.m. So the reducing the temperature on the playground by 15 degrees made a huge impact on their daily lives. So the main kind of strategy of the project was to make to put the school, the new building, at the back of the site, and to make a big space that is becomes actually the outdoor lunchroom. And basically, we needed to in order to upgrade this building to current accessibility standards, we provided a new handicap ramp here to the new elevator, and then this new elevator solved the ADA access for both buildings. But basically, since we knew we needed this handicap ramp, we like took that basically standard thing that we needed, and we overscaled it, and we turned it into a new street, a kind of pedestrian street that leads to the open space in the back and kind of ends with that. And so not only did this provide like a new connection for parishioners from the church to like get down to parking, so you can come up here and go down to the parking, which is underneath. Below the new playground is a whole semi-subterranean parking that provides over 200 parking spaces for the church, which was a component of the problem. This road that's wrapping around is a fire lane that was a required fire lane. So what we did was we took this required component and wrapped it around the whole site and made it a buffer between this site and a park, which is on the other side, which is a pretty dangerous place. So that new fire road became not only the access to the underground parking, so the fire road goes down to the parking where you can get in, and then it comes back up where the kids can be dropped off. So not only is it access to the parking, but it's a new drop-off for the kids. So prior to this, all the kids were getting dropped off on the city streets. So this allows like a whole new drop-off. And when you get dropped off, you're at the new kind of front of the school, which is right there. This is that new sort of porch space. This is the new, it's essentially, this space works in a whole variety of ways. The kids do their homework there in the afternoon. They eat lunch there. This picture happens to be in the morning before school started, and they kind of, some kids are gathering there, some kids are playing. So like this, basically this porch, we call it an urban porch, is the kind of main space of the whole project. And all we did was take these Volcraft trusses, that this is a gymnasium behind, which was the other important component of the problem, and we just cantilevered these basic Volcraft trusses over these columns that we made. These are columns that also double function as the shear for the building. And then that's how we kind of eked out a separate space for this lunchroom, which was not like funded within the program. So also when we do this kind of new public way into the site, that's really just the handicap ramp that's expanded, it also creates a new kind of circuit for the school, so that the school has a kind of T-shaped circulation with these existing stairs, and by adding this piece and the stair at the end, we created a whole new loop for the school that provides new ways to navigate around the school during the day. This just shows that simple diagram of going partway down and then coming partway up for a new arrival. This shows that kind of frontal condition when you arrive, once you drop off the kids, and you know, many times the kids are dropped off in the morning when it's dark, and so you do have this kind of quality. And also this school is used at night for adult education, and it's used on the weekends. So this school is used literally 24/7, and the kids like line up in front of this area, and then they get kind of sent out to their school. This is the gym beyond. That is also a new meeting room for the school. Prior to this, the school didn't have a place to do like a typical parent meeting. Their existing larger scale room that they had only would hold one half of the parents at a time, so they would have to sequence their meetings. This shows the kind of view as you're kind of moving around the school. This shows the kind of connection to the existing building and the new bridge, and this is the elevator behind here that upgrades both elements. This is the kind of entrance down into the parking. Some of the simple quality of the interiors. This was done for, the cost on this project was 1/4 the cost of a typical LAUSD school, which are also very cost effective. So this was done super, super, super cost effectively. And therefore, the kind of details of the insides are very minimal and consist of smart uses of paint to kind of get some of the spatial qualities that we wanted. One splurge was the acoustic ceiling that was made out of felt. And one of the things about the project is that not only is this a kind of lunchroom, but like this new space here double functions as a stage. And you can see that when there's a performance, that the whole building is shading all the people in the audience. It's also used at night. This is a new amenity, a kind of new a community amenity. It's the school gets some income from renting out the space for a variety of uses. And so you can see that how the space is activated at night. And just some other impromptu uses from our railing details. The next project that I'm just going to talk about really quickly is called the Paxton Associates. It's an office building in Studio City. I would say this project could be called part extrovert, part discrete volume. Essentially, this is the owner of the business, and this is the main conference room. And so we sort of created an articulation of the facade, a kind of thickening of the facade that is about capturing views to the mountains beyond, but also is about, like, in this case, on the main pedestrian street, providing a kind of sort of like creating like a space to the sidewalk. So these cantilevers begin to kind of create a kind of quality of space along this sidewalk and activate that sidewalk. But programmatically, the moves really have to do with some of the program inside. So this is our client. That's his separate conference room, but this is the main view from his office, and this is the way he walks to his secretary that sits here, and this is the main conference room that everyone shares. And so there is this quality that's made. This project is sort of in a part of Los Angeles called Studio City, which is an area where it's kind of a boulevard that's really a car-centric boulevard. And you can see that cars, so the goal of the way that we thought about this facade had a lot to do with thinking of the kind of way that the building sits in a car city, and the way that it sits also in a place that's like beginning to have a pedestrian life. Like not far from here is a little bit more of a pedestrian area, so that that sidewalk space I was showing you before begins to like talk about some of those pedestrian qualities. And then the kind of like beginning to show some of the program from the inside and make that internal program into like the elements of the facade. So that's the conference room, and this is the owner of the business, and this is his main connection to his secretary. And this view that you're looking at, there's a gas station right here, and so when I fill up my gas tank, this is the view that I get, and then this kind of overhang also makes the space for the parking for the office. This is just some of that views of that. This is the that's this slot from the outside, and this is looking out to the city street that the owner has. So these are all projects. This is just finished construction, so these are not official photos. These are from an iPhone. But they begin to kind of capture some of the qualities of this little project. This house is a project that we did in Point Dume in Malibu. Point Dume is this rock out here. This is a kind of rock on the coastline of north of Malibu, and it's called Point Dume. And this whole neighborhood that's near this big rock is referred to as Point Dume. From a geography standpoint, there's this big rock here, and then there's another kind of big hill here that's like another rock that splits our site in half, roughly right there. So this house sits partially on the other Point Dume and partially on a kind of slope that leads up to it. So this project is kind of part landform, part mammalian. Its plan moves has a kind of like involution quality, and also a kind of quality of slipping back to catch the view. So what these moves are about in the plan is the site, again, is this size, or this kind of shape. And these shapes in plan have to do with relating to the coast and the views up and down the coast. So on the bottom level, which is the living room, this is a view out to the ocean. So even though the site is on this direction here, actually the view to the ocean is this way. And then this upper bedroom is peeled back. The master bedroom is kind of peeled back to catch the views down to Santa Monica. Because at night, when you look at the ocean, it's kind of more interesting at night to look at city lights rather than just out to the ocean. So the kind of elements in plan that are happening are shaped according to this quality of the topography and the site's relationship to the edge of the ocean. So this project has this sort of one big bend. So you arrive up along this long road, and you have a kind of car court in the back, and then you enter in, and you arrive halfway, like on a level that's halfway between the second story and the bottom story. And so you kind of arrive and you descend through this curved double-story space, and then arrive into the living room where you have this kind of expansive view of the ocean. So this is that kind of corner that you would see as you're rounding up, and this makes a kind of more frontal condition to the ocean, like I was saying, and then this is the peel back that kind of emphasizes the view to Santa Monica, which is the city lights beyond. So this is the entrance, and you enter in a kind of slot of space that's between these two elements, one element kind of a more grounded and one lifting a little more. And this view right here is where you kind of get this small glimpse, and you descend down. So this is where you're arriving halfway, and then behind this wall right here is a stair that takes you up, or you go down. And this is the view of this, like basically there's this main sort of hallway, curved hallway space that has this natural light from above, and this is the view looking back to the entry from the master bedroom. So that view is like standing up there looking back. And then once you kind of arrive out of that like more vertical slot of space, you end up in this very horizontal space that is emphasizing the kind of horizon and the ocean beyond. And then that shape of the pool and some of this wall beyond sort of bend back around and emphasize the kind of length of the site. These are some peel-out windows that we developed that actually the project that I just showed you last, our client for that little office was our client for this house, and he kind of fell in love with these windows. But these windows, this is where we kind of developed these peel-out windows, which had to do with these rooms in the back getting ocean views, like you can see here. So that was a way to kind of allow these spaces in the back of the site to also be connected. And here's the view kind of at the tip where you see this kind of like S shape in plan, where you see the building kind of folding around on itself. And this is the kind of more frontal part of the house where you have this kind of larger public space to the kind of garden view. And beyond that is the sloped wall that is beside the pool right there. And this is looking from above, seeing that kind of relationship of that porch space above the pool and the pool beyond, taking your eye to the ocean. So this is a little project that I just thought I'd throw in here that we did for SCI-Arc, which is where we teach. SCI-Arc is the Southern California Institute for Architecture, and that I'm sure you guys maybe know about. But the building is a quarter of a mile long. It's a very long building, and so this was a competition for a cafe for the school that we worked on. And this one is sort of part apparatus, part nexus. So here's how the school sits in the city of Los Angeles. You can see that this is the site, and it's a very long, it was an old depot for trains. Goods would come in on one side and get discharged on the other side. So it was like a clearinghouse for goods, which is why it's such a long, skinny building. So the problem was to make a new cafe to design a new cafe for the school, and the place that the cafe was supposed to go was at the end here. The school is laid out like here's our wood shop, and our model making shop is down here. Studios are all in here. This is our main space where we have our lectures. This is our gallery space, and this was at the time considered to be like possible cafe space. So our solution was to basically take advantage of the fact that this used to be a kind of railway building, and we wanted to kind of reuse some existing railroad tracks and take an old train chassis and put the cafe, like clip it onto the building and make a kind of dirigible out of the cafe. So our proposal was for a kind of moving cafe that would move up and down the length of the school, and it could be parked at a variety of places and would give a kind of signal of where the event is happening at the school. So SCI-Arc is a kind of place that has a multiple, a kind of pluralistic approach to the way we teach and the way we think about teaching. And so this was a way of recognizing that the school maybe doesn't have a singular center, but could have the kind of possibility of like a multiple centers. And so these were these solar ribbons that we were going to wrap around this kind of armature that would then clip onto the building, and these solar ribbons would like power basically the dirigible. So it would be a kind of a fancy roach coach where that would also, the photovoltaic panel ribbons would power, you know, the cafe itself and the cooking components of the cafe. And then when it clips on to the building, it creates a kind of porch-like space that also provides like a shaded outdoor area to eat after you've gotten your food at the cafe. So this project is another little project, but it does relate to the things that I'm talking about today, which is why I'm showing it. This one is called Keep Off the Grass, Planar Landscape Phenomenon. This was an installation that we did at SCI-Arc. At SCI-Arc, in our gallery, every 2 months, there's a new show, and it's an installation where different architects from around the world are invited to come and work on an installation. So ours was sort of part artificial, part organic. So we were interested in studying the sod, and we thought about looking at a kind of floating plane of grass. We wanted to, the space of the gallery is a double-story space, so we wanted an installation that would transform the space of the gallery. We wanted something that would really like fill the gallery. And we were searching for a kind of materiality to work in, and we got interested in the fact that sod, especially hydroponic sod, which is grown in the desert on like thin sheets of visqueen, just with like seeds and water, how that material is a kind of simultaneously man-made and organic. It's man-made because, of course, it's manufactured, and also because it comes in 2-foot by 4-foot sheets. And of course, it's organic because it's actually a material that grows or dies, as the case may be. So we then got into kind of an investigation about some of the qualities of the sod, and we started to understand some of the pitfalls of the kind of overuse of sod in such an urban environment as Los Angeles. This shows the kind of structure of our piece. That was basically a series of curved beams and a ruled surface in between these curved beams. So the ruled surface was made with 1-inch pipes, steel pipes, and it was basically a set of straight lines that spanned on top of these curved beams, and that created this curved surface. So you can see here that the surface of our piece really filled the whole gallery, and how it also cut the gallery into 2 spaces, like a space above and a space below. In the room, we created this element in the room that was a line of light, and that line of light was essentially a kind of water line. And that water line was created in a way that if you fill up the whole room to that line of light, that would be the amount of water that was needed to water this sod for 1 year. So we made a kind of registration between the scale of the room and the kind of need of the water. And then we had sort of above that line of light that you can see here, that water line, we had all these kind of statistical information about some of the problems of sod. And then we placed these pools of water underneath the piece that kind of reflected these kind of bottom part of the pieces, but also it was a kind of symbol of like the kind of element of water. But we did not water the piece. So the actual sod that we used was not watered. And you can see that we were kind of really trying to express this like super thin plane of sod in a very architectural way. So these are the 1-inch pipes, and this is the kind of gap that existed between. And I don't know if you can see it, but there's this stainless steel wire that you can see here that was like all tying it together. So even though this piece seems shape-wise to be very ephemeral, it was structurally like very rigid, like you couldn't move it. And these were all the kind of shear connection to connect the pipes to these beams. And then you can see that these light wires that was hanging from the ceiling, this was all shear. So like actually if you tried to push it, it was very, very strong and wouldn't move. So this was almost like a kind of quilt in terms of how it was fabricated, like very low-tech components, but all put together in a way that created this larger effect and this kind of unworldly quality of this kind of floating sod, plane of sod. The interesting thing that happened is that, so the sod, you know, we wanted something to fill the room, and it ended up not just filling the room, but it ended up like kind of like being a piece that whose presence in the room went outside of the room through smell, because the sod had a really strong smell. And and actually Ming Feng, I thought she would never forgive me because her office wasn't far from here, and she smelled this sod decaying for, 6 weeks. But what happened is that when the sod decayed, or when it, as it went through entropy, it shrunk. And so what happened when it shrunk is that it became porous. And so then you actually saw the 2x4 artificial man-made rectangles, like as they laid over the whole piece. And so when it went through this entropy, not only did it have this kind of smell associated with it, but it had this like changing quality in the gallery where the space that had been previously divided into 2 spaces like suddenly connected again. So I think that kind of entropic condition of that project was something that we really were fascinated by. The Birch residence is a house that actually my students saw. So hopefully I'm not taking too long. Yeah. This is, let's say, part spatial apparatus, part modern box. This project has a large double-story volume that runs through it, connecting the front and the back. And the site plan is something like this, where this is a kind of typical city in this part, typical plan of this part of the city. This is a great street that has restaurants, and this is a kind of semi-urban project. From here you can walk to many restaurants. You can do all of your daily needs by walking. But like mainly these houses are like, a typical post-war house with a driveway to a garage in the back. So they all have these kind of outbuilding in the back, which is a garage, and then they have many pools. So we just tried to rethink it, but in a super simple way. So what we did was put the garage underneath so that we could use the whole site. And then the outbuilding, in this case, was a kind of office space for the family. And then we brought the pool like into the house. So the main kind of strategy is that we made this a double volume space that curves, that has a skylight the whole length of it, and also has this kind of sunshade. So north is up. So basically the shape of this double story space has to do with the kind of rising and setting of the sun. So this shape has to do with tracking the sun, but also has to do with how you enter, which is that there's a sycamore tree here that's kind of on center with the whole thing. And you enter like with a glimpse onto there, and then you're brought off center. And then as you begin to like walk along the curve, and you enter into a small vestibule here, and there's a certain moment where the whole view to the back like really opens up. So this curve is not only about the kind of sun, but it's about a kind of spatial, sorry, I keep not using this right. It's about a way of creating a threshold. And then when you get in the house, this curve also kind of behaves in a way that really expands the kind of volume of the space internally. And then the pool is like a reflected kind of curve that works the other way, and it also slots into this double-story space right there that you see here. There's this kind of great joint moment between the kind of interior volume and the kind of volume of the pool. here you kind of see that double-story volume, it not only handles like how you enter the house, but it also contains the kind of main stair of the house, and a kind of the stair, which is not just a singular stair, but a kind of sculptural element. The stair is, part of the stair is kind of pulled out of the ground, and the other half of the stair is sort of brought down from the ceiling. So here's the entrance where you enter at a lower level and you come up a few steps to here, and then you would keep going, and then this level is a slightly lower level, and then you turn around and get a few more stairs, and then the master bedroom is over there and a bridge to the other bedroom. So this is the front where that double-story volume exists, and how we pull out the kind of sunshade and a kind of wall of it to like bring that double-story space like into the front courtyard. This is a view from the rear of it. And the other thing is that spatially what's happening on the project is that there's this kind of more horizontal space this way, and then a kind of double-story space that intersects it. And when you're in this room, that's just another view of the stair. That's the feeling, the lateral kind of conditions that you get, which feel much more horizontal. So when you're looking from the kitchen to the living room, you get this kind of more like a sandwich of space. And then this is that double-story volume, and this is where the pool is pulling in. Another view of the stair, bedroom. This is the garage underneath. But what you really get in this house is when you're in the living, dining, kitchen area, your house feels as big as the whole site. The house really expands to feel the whole site, which is really important in this house because it's a very, very tight site. Here's where you see that. So here's where you're inside, and then the whole house feels like as big as the whole site. And that's that kind of the outdoor part of the double-story space where the pool carves in. So this project is a project that's under construction, we think. It's in Chengdu, it's in China, so one never knows. But I have a few students at SCI-Arc who are who are from Chengdu, so they always go check on it. This is a housing project where 56 villas, basically. So this is our island. And we basically made 6 different types of villas that will be distributed to make 56 houses. So what we were looking at on this project is how can it's essentially, they call it villas, but really its density is more like a townhome. So it's kind of this thing that's part townhome, part villa. And how we accomplished that was by deforming the townhome to make a space for the garden. And then that space for the garden that we make also allows views from the back part of the house so that you can kind of view through those outdoor spaces that we make. This is the city of Chengdu, and then this new city that our project is a part of is being built down here. And it's a lake city. And it's built in a agrarian part of the landscape where there's these mounds that naturally exist. So they're kind of flooding a place where there's these natural mounds, and then those mounds are essentially becoming the islands. And so here you can see this kind of, again, very similar. This was in development at the same time that the Birch House was in development. And so you see this kind of similar inner kind of public space of the house that you see in here, and then these gardens beside. That's that kind of inner space of the house. That's also like a kind of way to bring light in the house. That brings light to the center of the house. Here, you can see that this road that you access the villas from is 1 story up from the lake. So you access on the middle level, and then you go down to like spaces below, or you go up to spaces on the 3rd floor. In this project, the kind of part of the form well, you can see how the form itself is morphed, but there's a kind of front and back condition at play in our project. These are just some of the plans on how these one section fits together and how the houses kind of all face to one side. Basically, the courtyard for your house is always on one side, so the other neighbor's house doesn't have so many windows on that side. And that's the third floor. And here you can see that kind of idea about like using the courtyard as the device to kind of see through. This is some of the qualities of these projects, where they all had these pool elements. And we had a variety of ways where we have, like, for instance, this is a bedroom that has a little porch off of it and then has a bridge back to the center core, which you see there. Again, some of these kind of peel outs, sometimes making decks, sometimes making views from the back. These kind of like, this one is a little bit like the two-headed snake. Is kind of like one bigger room and a smaller room that begin to define themselves. And this is some of that quality of like the sort of the courtyard kind of space versus the kind of inside looking out to your courtyard. Another kind of the kind of vertical slots of space that run through it. So this is a brand new project that is not done. These are going to be construction photos. This is a little bit of like a sort of some lessons learned from the Keep Off the Grass project, which is that we made the ceiling of this project is a kind of where all the event is, and the way that we shape the space is through the ceiling. And so again, we used these idea of a ruled surface, some curved beams, and straight lines that begin to make a kind of undulating surface that defines the different areas in the room. So it's a loft-like space, but like within this loft-like space, you get like rooms like this. Like for instance, this part here where it's the lowest and tightest is the media room. It's very dark in there. You get other kinds of spaces like the living room out here, or you get the kitchen over in here. So this ceiling begins to define the different areas of the room while maintaining its loft-like quality. This is an overall site plan. It was a renovation. So this part is existing and that part is existing, and so we sort of rebuilt this whole center part in here as the renovation. And then this is the entrance that you were just seeing, where you kind of like, you kind of tuck around into this garden courtyard. This is that kind of a worm's eye view of it, showing the qualities of that roof and how there's a kind of skylight that is curved in plan. And then because the shape of the ceiling is curved in section, you get this super interesting space of the skylight where it's curved in plan and section, but all through very simple construction means, which is straight lines. And these are some of the quality of the space. There's a big cantilevered porch that comes out the end, and then this skylight, it kind of continues out there with a sky hole. And these are some of the qualities of the space. It has, this wasn't the idea, but the undulated ceiling has a kind of resonance with the kind of landscape beyond that is framed by the kind of openings that you see. So these again are just taken on my iPhone. This was taken like yesterday. But it just thought it's interesting to show because it's kind of definitely a project that's working along the lines of the projects that I'm talking about. So I just have two more. Hopefully I'm not overstaying my welcome. This project is a project that's dear to our hearts. It's called the Vertical Garden. And it was a competition that we were one of the winners of, but it was a competition to rethink. At the time, there was a new building going next to the Schindler House, which was perceived of as being sort of intrusive to the Schindler House. And so the name of the competition was Vertical Garden, and the kind of main impetus of the project was to create some kind of like well, here, this was from the competition brief. So it was like a line along here, like some kind of way of separating the Schindler House, which you see here, from the project just to the south of it. When we started to think about the project, we were thinking about the history of the Schindler House and how, you know, the Schindler House really never was a house. even though it's considered a domestic space, and it was lived in for a very short period of time, but it was like a kind of a failed experiment on a house. And even though it's a project that we all revere, it's never, some of its original conditions have been lost. It's never really been used as a house. It's no longer in a bean field. I mean, this was the kind of condition of it originally, and this part of the city is one of the densest part of the city. The height limit in this area is 50 feet, and so it's all multifamily sites. Like this site by zoning is a multifamily site, and so there's all apartment buildings all around and very few single-family homes left. So what we were reflecting on when we were thinking about the problem, it seemed like the problem of like kind of making a division between this project and another project didn't so much make sense. So we were interested in rethinking the Schindler House as an artifact in the city. And so we had a kind of maybe more radical proposal, which was to kind of make a whole new wrapper, a whole new container for the Schindler House. So our basic idea was that we would take a set of double helix ramps, wrap it all around as a container, and we would float the Schindler House in the middle and make an amphitheater below and a rooftop garden above at the 50-foot datum. So here you see some of the rooftop garden. Here you see the double helix ramps, and then the Schindler House kind of floated in there as like really emphasizing its condition as an artifact. And here you see how the Schindler House would float in this like a larger volume. This would be the kind of new roof garden, which was like, we thought of this 50-foot height limit in the city as a kind of recreated ground plane, a kind of new datum in the city. And so we put this rooftop garden with a big oculus that kind of relates back to the space of the Schindler House below. And so the kind of massing of the project and the envelope of the project was a kind of relationship between these kind of very rectilinear in plan ramps that were handicap accessible, and the kind of skin, a new skin that separated the two double helix ramps, which wrapped around each other. So what you get is this kind of like one language of ramps, which relates to the kind of geometry of the city and the box of the site, and another language of a surface that spans between these ramps and creates a new sort of space, not just separating one ramp from another ramp, but beginning to kind of create like an outside layer to the object and a kind of inside layer. So sometimes you'd be moving on the outside and sometimes you'd be moving on the inside, and you get different glimpses of the Schindler House and different views of it. So this is our physical model, which is owned actually by the MAC Museum, well, the Contemporary Art Museum in Vienna. That is the one who sponsored the project. And here you see that this is like the part that's above the ground, and this is the part that's below the ground. And then here, this is a kind of section axon showing that relationship of the kind of space on the inside and the kind of mass on the outside. And this just kind of talking about like that, what we mean about like making the Schindler House into an artifact is like somehow this container makes it more precious, is the idea. And these are just some of the views that you would see. This is a kind of view from the street. This is the kind of looking down from one of the balconies. The double helix ramps are such that it's a new park also. It becomes a kind of way not just to connect theater to Schindler House to park or to roof garden, but a way of like also having a way that you could like walk your dog, or you could take a run, or a kind of new path in the city. And all conforming to all the setbacks and all perfectly buildable. Seriously. So this is the last project. So this is the proposal for we and 1,700 of our closest friends submitted proposals to the Guggenheim Helsinki. And so even though, of course we didn't win, This is still an important project for us, and this will be the last project that I'm going to talk about. So in a way, this one is kind of in that family of part landform, part mammalian. What we were interested in this project is, it's also, you could consider it part museum, part park, so it's not unrelated to the vertical garden project, even though formally it has some some newer kind of qualities, let's say. So if you're not familiar with Helsinki, the site for the Guggenheim competition is here, and it was on a waterway that where this is the kind of elevation of that waterway, and there's a park up here, which you see over here, and then this is a part of the city where there's these big ships that come in here. Like that's a docking station for a big ship. Here's another one over there, so you can see this big ships. So we are interested in a project that not only brought the city to the water, but a project that kind of makes an architecture that relates to the edge of the water and relates to some of the qualities of the water. So what we did in our project is that we made this form that it only hits the ground in 3 places. So here, here, and here, and then this is a kind of restaurant at the end. So by doing that, we can open up the whole site to be a kind of a park underneath. And so sequentially, you can come through the park and into our site. We also extended the kind of promenade that's along the waterway. And from a geometry standpoint, we worked with a kind of like an emergent geometry. So the main bulk of the mass is made through a kind of sectional. Let's see if I have it here. I'll go back to that in 1 second. This section, it's this kind of basic shape that twists around as it moves in plan. It twists in section. And then we complemented that quality by a kind of Boolean strategy where we carved away with this other geometry that created this new profiles on the first move that created a kind of new character, a new, the thing that we were after in this project was that from different points of view in the city, you would get different quality of the project while still being urbanistically, this is a kind of public space, so I can walk on the promenade here. This makes a kind of space at the end of this street here. Then the kind of, this inner part is a kind of inner street, so I can walk from the public way here through the inner street and then go back up to the park. So here you can see that there's a loggia there, and this is a kind of like part of this is a big cantilever part. So the other thing is it's very cold in Helsinki, so we wanted some covered areas for the outdoor areas, so much of these areas are covered. But also this is that inner street I was telling you about where there's this pinch. So the form sort of starts here and goes around like that and creates this inner pinch that's like an inner street that's parallel to the walkway along the water. We also, this little chunk that comes down, that's the whole service chunk that has the service entry and all the freight elevators. This is the kind of main entrance here that has a gift shop and also the main entrance, which is right here. And has escalators up to the museum itself. And then the other piece on the ground was a theater piece that has a stage that opens up to an outdoor theater, and that outdoor theater can use the same stage. So you could use that stage either for the outside or for the inside. And then this was a kind of restaurant component. So we were interested in bringing the park a little bit through the space and starting to bring the park to the water. And then also bringing the water kind of into the city by making the space along it that activates it. This is the kind of, there's this tail piece that made a bridge to the park. So, because this is a pretty, you can walk from the park, like cross the road and arrive through the project that way, but you can also go from the park straight across a bridge and arrive, and then come down a stair and arrive in the project that way. This is that inner kind of street that I was telling you about, and this is a kind of, that's a porch that's outside of a cafe that's at the top of the museum. The main spaces of the museum are on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floors up in this area. And basically from the entrance let's see. There. That's the entrance, and there's this kind of main escalator that where you go up and you go up and you arrive up into the museum spaces. The main structural system was a kind of big exoskeleton around the whole project that allowed for more open gallery spaces that would have curatorial flexibility. And the spatial sequence that we developed within the museum had also a lot of flexibility. The curators could set it up so that you had a very specific path through the museum, or that you had flexibility with how you moved through the museum. This is some of the quality of under the space. The skin was an idea about some of these apertures might really be like windows, and some are kind of lights, or not all of these apertures are windows, but when they are just lights or just glass, they also kind of have the quality of reflecting the activity that's in the urban condition up onto the building. This is that quality I was talking about, and these are the main levels of the museum. This is the view from the city. So when you come off of the main street that you would access it from the city, there's a few things that happen. One is this kind of like window right there is a kind of view from the sidewalk up into the main galleries, a kind of sneak peek. And then if you were to cross the street here, what you have is like the building itself kind of frames the view to the waterways beyond. And then this is a kind of another way to access it. So these just show you some of that spatial sequence and some of the kind of interior qualities of the project. And that's one of the main spaces that's at this nose kind of condition. There's this stair at the nose, and then that's the kind of inside experience of the nose and how it pulls back a little bit. Thank you.
So Margaret, you were talking about how this project was really important to you, but you kind of like were kind of didn't tell us a little bit more about how this project is in the office and like
Well, I think it's just a project that where we were able to pursue a lot of the interests that a lot of the things that we're interested in, like with the hybrid form, with the way that you move through space, with the kind of urban things that we're into. Like it kind of, for us, it was an exploration of all the components that we are interested in thinking about in our projects, and it's a kind of scale that we don't have museum projects in our office. So I think like why, even though it's unbuilt, it's important to us because it's a way for us to explore things that we don't get to in our everyday practice. But many of the same things that we were looking at here are happening in our more discrete projects that we might have in our practice, such as the houses or the office, or something like this is a little bit meatier and allows you to explore things on a more, let's say, grander scale. But I think that, so for instance, formally, there's qualities to this form and the kind of hybrid condition that I'm talking about that, we probably aren't going to be able to achieve in a house. But like in a project like this, we can really study those in a little more detail. Then in that case, I'm talking about the two geometries that were kind of overlaid to get this new kind of character, this new, it's like not so describable, again, in a single term. It's like something, but yet it's not just that it's new, but that it also works in a way that when in all the places that you see it in the city, it has this kind of interesting effect. So it's not just that it's a sort of a different character from each place. It's that it in each moment where its character reveals itself, it's like something especially appropriate about it. So it's strategic in terms of how we get it. It's not just like a kind of random thing. But I think that why it's important to us is that it's a project that's really doing a lot of the things that we're really interested in.
Thank you for coming today. It was an excellent question is about your housing development in China. Your large body of your work is very sculptural, very beautiful, but is usually located in a more mundane context where it's allowed to be a gem within a normative field condition. However, in that project, you've established a very spectacular field condition where possibly so much spectacle, they start reading the same. How does that affect your work and how you're thinking about the formal process in that project?
That's interesting. In that case, that's a really interesting question, because in that particular case, like, we were hired, the reason why I don't know if it's built yet is because they were building more simple ones first and then selling those and then using that funding to begin to work on, let's say, a more slightly radical one. So in their case, I think that the developer was seeking that from, they hired us for that kind of quality. And we don't mind it actually becoming a new field, so we don't mind. There, I think the interest, like where it gets, I think it had to do with kind of at the front and at the back, it rectifies itself into kind of more like sort of viewing, sort of, we did kind of chop it towards the back to kind of get at a kind of front and back quality that makes a kind of notion of a kind of framed view a part of the project. So I think like the way that we saw it is a lot of that, a lot of the more complicated part you won't really see if you're experiencing it from the edge, because you're going to see really the framed view conditions. But that one is specifically like we were hired as the ones to be the more kind of radical ones in there. They were building the more simple ones first. But we were really interested in, you know, like sort of Alphabet City, let's say, that book by Stephen Hull, and the kind of the use of alphabets to bring light in, but the kind of deformation of a basic form to not just create like a garden court, but to like bring light and to allow for a view. So that was what was interesting to us about that project.
Other questions?
Thank you, guys. I know it's a tough day. Oh. That's a great question. We actually begin with a lot of research. So we research things on multiple levels. We research the site, we research the program, we research a whole variety of things, and then we work a lot in drawings. So we still are very drawing is like a way of life in our office. Like me and John draw all the time. We almost can't talk without drawing. And then we work a lot in physical models. So we start with more basic physical, and a physical model to us can be like a computer model or a physical model. So first we work with basic computer models, but we work back and forth between physical models and, you know, like computer models, and then drawing. And then just like over and over again, we have a big wall in our office that we pin everything up on. So we're constantly pinning everything up and seeing it all together. And then we use that wall as like an idea wall and as a brainstorming wall. And then our conference table is right in front of that wall. So we have a lot of dialogue in our office. And everyone who works for us is a designer, and they're all engaged in the process. So it's a very synthetic way that we work, and it's not always so. It's not like a formulaic.
When we were at the office, at your office, we saw a lot of the finished models were done with 3D printing in segments or sometimes as a whole. Has being able to 3D print final models had any effect feeding back into your design process, rather than the alternative being having to physically build models not with 3D printing?
Right. That's a great question, because actually it has not had no effect at all. Like, we mostly use our 3D printers to like output stuff that we've already figured out, and we mostly, for the physical models that we do in the beginning, a lot of it's like by hand. Sometimes we'll print like quick things in 3D in the beginning, but like it's more like quicker prototyping in the beginning, and actually a lot of the times in the office like all those models that you saw that we had just printed, those are projects that basically we use the summertime when we have more interns to get more of our physical models and our drawings that, you know, like that are for us accomplished. Because like we spend so much time during the year doing all of our like working drawings and development drawings that we usually use the summers to kind of catch up with some of our presentation materials. And so that's why you saw those. And many times, like if we're doing a competition or something, we have to send out the model to get printed. Like it's hard to print them in-house for things like that. Because like, even though we have a pretty big one, it's like very component, you know, like we end up having all these components and having a lot of Bondo involved and a lot of sanding, you know what I mean? It's not like abracadabra with the printers.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.